The Great Hall of the Galactic Council stretched out like a vast metal ocean, hundreds of seats filled with beings from across the galaxy. Some had scales that shined like mirrors, others had tentacles that moved like ocean waves. A few had bodies made of pure light that flickered and danced. In the middle of it all sat Park Hyun-woo. He was human. He was also the newest member of this ancient gathering. The morning session had been difficult. 3 different alien species had questioned whether humans deserved to be there. They said humans were too young as a species, too simple, too backward. Now it was lunchtime. Hyun-woo opened his small metal container. The smell of home filled the air around him. Kimchi sat next to perfectly grilled bulgogi. White rice made a small mountain in one corner. His mother had packed this meal for him before he left Earth. She said it would remind him where he came from. He picked up his chopsticks and took a bite of the fermented cabbage. The sour and spicy taste made him smile. For a moment he forgot where he was. That moment did not last long. A sharp sound like breaking glass filled the air. Ambassador Veltar of the Nexari pointed one of his crystal fingers at Hyun-woo's food. His voice came through a small machine that turned his thoughts into words. Look at this primitive display. The human consumes rotting vegetables by choice. Other voices joined in. The insect-like hive speaker Zack made clicking sounds that his translator turned into words of disgust. We have studied human feeding habits. They burn their food with fire until it loses all natural essence. Such waste. More aliens turned to stare at Hyun-woo's simple lunchbox. Some made sounds of confusion. Others seemed upset. A few looked like they might be sick. Flowing Current of Wisdom was an Aquarian. Her people lived in the deep oceans of their world. She spoke in waves of sound that became gentle words through her translator. The chemical substances your species adds to food would poison most civilized worlds. We do not understand this need to change what nature provides. Hyun-woo kept eating. He had been warned this might happen. Earth's diplomats had told him to expect this kind of treatment, but hearing it was different from expecting it. More aliens began to speak. They called human food disgusting. They said it showed how backward humans were. Some suggested that any species that deliberately ate rotten food could not be trusted with important decisions. The Corvan Empire's ambassador was the worst of all. Grex was huge even by alien standards. He looked like a bear crossed with a lion. His people were warriors who had conquered dozens of worlds. When Grex spoke, his voice shook the air. This proves what we have said all along. Humans are too primitive to sit with civilized beings. Look at how they treat their sustenance. They torture it with heat and chemicals. They mix things together that should never touch. They even eat plants that have begun to rot. Grex stood up. His massive frame cast a shadow over the human's small table. Any species that cannot even feed itself properly has no place making decisions about galactic affairs. I motion that humans be removed from this council immediately. Several other ambassadors made sounds of agreement. The Nexari crystals chimed in harmony. The hive speaker's clicking grew faster and louder. Hyun-woo felt his face grow hot. Not from anger, though that was there too. From something else. From the knowledge that they were wrong about his people, about his food, about everything they thought they understood. He stood up slowly. The lunchbox remained open on his table. The smell of garlic and ginger still filled the air around him. Some aliens moved away from the scent as if it might hurt them. You think you understand human food, Hyun-woo said. His voice was calm, but it carried clearly across the great hall. You think we are primitive because we change what nature gives us. You believe we are backward because we use fire and time and care to make our food better. He picked up a piece of bulgogi with his chopsticks. The meat was dark and rich. It had been marinated for days in soy sauce and sesame oil, his grandmother's recipe. But you know nothing about what you are judging. The hall grew quiet. Even the alien translators seemed to pause. Hyun-woo looked around the room. At the crystal beings who thought fermentation was decay. at the insect people who thought cooking was waste, at the water dwellers who thought spices were poison, at the warriors who thought preparation was weakness. "I have an idea," he said. "Since you are all so certain that human food is disgusting and primitive, why don't you try it for yourselves?" Ambassador Grex laughed. It sounded like rocks falling down a mountain. "You would poison us with your rotted plants and burned meat?" "I would feed you," Hyunwoo said simply, "the way my people feed each other, with care, with respect, with love." The word love seemed to confuse the aliens. Their translators made strange sounds as they tried to process the concept. "I invite all of you to a proper human meal," Hyunwoo continued. "Not this simple lunchbox, but real human food, prepared the way it should be prepared, if you still find it disgusting. After that, I will personally recommend that humanity withdraw from this council." The silence that followed was complete. No one had expected this challenge. Veltar's crystal body flickered with what might have been surprise. "You would stake your species' membership on a meal?" "I would stake it on the truth," Hyunwoo replied. "You claim to be civilized beings who value knowledge and understanding. But you mock what you have never experienced. You judge what you have never tried to comprehend." He closed his lunchbox with a soft click. The smell of home began to fade from the air. "Come to the human embassy in 3 days," he said to the entire assembly. "Come and learn what human food really is. Come and discover what it means when a species cares enough about nourishment to make it art." Grex was still standing. His warriors' pride had been challenged in front of the entire council. "And if we find your food as revolting as we expect?" Hyunwoo met the giant alien's gaze without flinching. "Then humanity will leave this council with dignity intact. We will know we tried to bridge the gap between our peoples. But if you discover that you were wrong about us," Hyunwoo added, "then perhaps you will have learned something important about judging other species too quickly." The human ambassador gathered his things and walked out of the great hall. Behind him, dozens of alien voices began talking at once. Some sounded curious, others seemed angry, a few appeared confused, but they were all talking about his challenge. And in 3 days, they would have their answer. 3 days passed, like a storm. News of the human challenge spread through every corner of the galaxy. Some species laughed at what they called human foolishness. Others wondered if there might be more to the story. The human embassy buzzed with activity. Ships arrived every hour, bringing supplies from Earth. The smell of spices filled the hallways: ginger and garlic, sesame oil and soy sauce, red pepper flakes that made some of the alien workers sneeze. Park Hyunwoo stood in the main dining hall, watching his team work. The room had been empty yesterday. Now it looked like a completely different place. Soft lights hung from the ceiling. Tables were arranged in small groups instead of long rows. Each table had been set for different types of beings. Lee Minji hurried past carrying a box of vegetables. She was the embassy's cultural expert. She also used to be a chef on Earth, before joining the diplomatic service. Her grandmother had taught her to cook when she was 7 years old. "The Nexari delegation confirmed they are coming," she called to Hyunwoo. So did the Hive speaker and 3 others from his cluster. Even the Aquarians agreed to attend. Behind her came Cho Dong-ho. He was a food scientist who understood how different alien bodies processed nutrients. His job was to make sure nobody got sick from eating human food. He carried a thick book filled with notes about alien biology. "I have been working on the recipes for 2 days straight," Dong-ho said. He looked tired but excited. "Every species that confirmed will be able to safely eat what we prepare. The hard part is making it taste good to them." The last member of their team was Kim Subin. She was a diplomat who specialized in finding common ground between enemies. Her job was usually to stop wars before they started. Today she was helping to plan a dinner party. "How many confirmed so far?" Subin asked as she joined the group. Minji checked her list. 47 beings from 9 different species. Not everyone accepted the invitation. Some called it beneath their dignity. But enough said yes to fill this room. Hyunwoo felt a knot form in his stomach. 47 aliens would judge not just his food, but his entire species. If this went wrong, humans might lose their place in the galactic community forever. Are we making a terrible mistake? He asked quietly. Subin put a hand on his shoulder. Every diplomatic breakthrough starts with someone taking a risk. You made the challenge. Now we have to see it through. Dong-ho opened his book and showed them pages covered with charts and numbers. I have analyzed the biology of every species coming tonight. Some cannot process certain proteins. Others need different mineral levels in their food. The Nexari require silicon compounds. The Corvens need much higher calorie density. Can we really make Korean food that works for all of them? Minji wondered. We can adapt it, Dong-ho said with confidence. The basic principles remain the same: fermentation, marination, balanced flavors. We just change the ingredients to match their needs. Minji nodded and began unpacking her supplies. I brought everything from Earth. Real kimchi starter culture. Aged soy sauce. Gochujang that has been fermenting for 2 years. If we are going to do this, we do it properly. The next few hours passed in a blur of preparation. Minji worked magic in the kitchen. She took traditional Korean recipes and transformed them for alien biology. Kimchi made with silicon-based vegetables for the Nexari. Bulgogi prepared with insect protein for the hive speakers. Soup broths enriched with liquid nutrients for the Aquarians. Dong-ho tested every dish to make sure it was safe. He used instruments that could detect the smallest trace of harmful compounds. Nothing left the kitchen without his approval. Subin worked on the seating arrangements. She made sure that species who disliked each other were placed far apart. She also arranged for traditional diplomats to sit near the more adventurous ones. If someone panicked, she wanted calm voices nearby. As evening approached, Hyunwoo found himself alone in the dining hall. The tables were set. The food was nearly ready. Soft music played from hidden speakers. Everything looked perfect. But he, still worried. Second thoughts? Hyunwoo turned to find Minji standing behind him. She had changed from her cooking clothes into a traditional Korean dress. It was deep blue with silver embroidery. Many second thoughts, he admitted. What if they hate everything? What if someone gets sick? What if this makes relations worse instead of better? Minji walked over to one of the tables. She picked up a spoon and examined it thoughtfully. Do you know why I became a chef before I became a diplomat? Hyunwoo shook his head. Because cooking is the most honest form of communication, she said. When you prepare food for someone, you cannot lie. If you are angry, it shows in the taste. If you are careless, the texture suffers. If you do not care about the person you are feeding, they will know. She set the spoon down carefully. But when you cook with love, with respect, with the desire to nourish and comfort, that shows too. People can taste sincerity, even alien people. Dong-ho joined them, carrying a tray of small dishes. Final taste tests, he announced. Everything is ready. The samples looked beautiful. Colors that did not exist in nature, textures that seemed impossible, smells that made the mouth water even though they came from completely artificial ingredients. The Nexari kimchi maintains the fermented tang while providing the silicon compounds they need, he explained. The hive speaker bulgogi uses cultured insect protein but tastes exactly like the traditional recipe. The Aquarian soup is completely liquid but has all the complexity of a traditional stew. Subin arrived carrying a communication device. They are starting to arrive. The Nexari delegation just landed. The Corvins are 30 minutes out. Through the windows, they could see alien ships settling onto the embassy landing pads. Beings who had never set foot in human space before were coming to share a meal. "What happens if Ambassador Grex decides to cause trouble?" Hyun-woo asked. "Then we handle it with grace and dignity," Subin replied. "But I have a feeling tonight will be different than any of us expect." The first guests began arriving as the sun set over the embassy grounds. They came cautiously, some with security guards, others with scientists to test the food for poison, all of them curious despite their suspicions. Veltar arrived in a transport that looked like a giant crystal. His body chimed softly as he walked, creating music with each step. Behind him came his aide, a smaller Nexari who carried what looked like medical equipment. The Hive Speaker delegation landed in a ship that buzzed like a massive insect. Zack emerged first, his compound eyes scanning the area for threats. 3 other members of his species followed, clicking to each other in their complex language. Last came the Corvins. Their ship was black and angular, built for war. Ambassador. Grek stepped out wearing what looked like ceremonial armor. 2 other Corvins flanked him, both nearly as large as their leader. As the aliens gathered in the embassy lobby and strange quiet fell over the group. They had come expecting to prove human inferiority. Instead, they found themselves as nervous guests in an unfamiliar place. Hyun-woo stepped forward to greet them. He wore a simple black suit that his mother had given him when he first became a diplomat. It made him feel connected to home and family. "Welcome to the human embassy," he said formally. "Thank you for accepting our invitation. Tonight we hope to share with you something important about our species and our culture." He gestured toward the dining hall. "Please join us for dinner." The real test was about to begin. The dining hall had become something magical. Gone was the cold meeting room feel. In its place was warmth and comfort that seemed to wrap around everyone who entered. Soft golden light made even the strangest alien features look welcoming. Each table had been prepared for different types of beings. The Nexari had plates made of polished metal that would not interfere with their silicon-based biology. The Aquarians had special bowls that could hold liquid food at exactly the right temperature. The Corvans had massive platters suited for their warrior appetites. Minji and her team moved through the room like dancers. They carried dishes that steamed and sparkled. The smells were incredible. Garlic and ginger mixed with spices from a dozen worlds. Fermented vegetables created rich, deep aromas that seemed to change as they moved through the air. Ambassador Grex entered the hall like a storm cloud. His massive frame filled the doorway. The ceremonial armor he wore made him look even more intimidating. His 2 companions flanked him, their eyes scanning for any sign of threat or trick. "So this is human hospitality," Grex rumbled. His voice shook glasses on nearby tables. "Pretty lights and strange smells? Where is this feast you promised?" Hyun-woo approached with calm confidence. He carried a single bowl filled with what looked like simple soup, but the smell rising from it was anything but simple, rich and complex, familiar somehow, even to beings who had never experienced it before. "This is Seoleong Tang," Hyun-woo said, offering the bowl to Grex. "Bone broth that has been cooking for 3 days. For your people, we added herbs from your homeworld and proteins that match your nutritional needs. But the base is the same. Soup Korean mothers have made for their children for thousands of years." Grex stared at the bowl suspiciously. The liquid inside was cloudy white and steaming. Small pieces of what looked like meat and vegetables floated in it. To Corvin eyes, it looked like nothing special. "You expect me to consume this simple broth?" he asked. "I expect you to experience what it means when someone cares enough to spend 3 days making something perfect for you," Hyun-woo replied. Across the room, other first encounters were happening. Veltar approached his table with the careful precision his crystal people were known for. His plate held what looked like traditional kimchi, but the vegetables sparkled with mineral compounds his body required. He picked up a piece with a utensil, designed for his crystalline fingers. The first bite made his entire body chime with surprise. The fermented taste was nothing like he had expected. Instead of rotting vegetables, he found complex flavors that seemed to dance on his senses. "This transformation you call fermentation," he said to Minji, who stood nearby watching anxiously. "It is not decay at all. It is controlled evolution. You have taught bacteria to create new compounds that did not exist in the original plant." Minji smiled with relief. "Exactly. We do not let our vegetables rot. We guide them through a process that makes them more nutritious and more flavorful than nature alone could provide." At another table, Hive speaker Zach examined his portion of modified bulgogi with compound eyes that could see details invisible to other species. The protein was familiar to him, cultured insect matter that his people considered standard food, but the preparation was completely foreign. "This protein source has been treated with liquid compounds for extended time," he observed. His clicking speech patterns made his translator work hard to convert his thoughts into words others could understand. "The cellular structure has been altered without heat application. How is this achieved?" Dong Ho appeared at his side, excited to explain. "Marination. We soak the protein in a mixture of enzymes and flavor compounds. They break down tough fibers and carry taste deep into the cellular structure. Time does what force cannot." Zach took his first bite. His antennae twitched with surprise. The familiar protein had become something entirely new. The flavor was deep and rich in ways his people had never achieved. It was efficient nutrition transformed into something approaching art. "This is unexpected optimization," he clicked rapidly. "Your species has discovered how to maximize both nutritional value and sensory satisfaction simultaneously." But it was at the Corvin table where the most important drama was unfolding. Grex still held the bowl of soup, staring at it as if it might contain poison. His companions watched him carefully. In Corvin culture, the leader always ate first. If he showed weakness or fear, it would reflect badly on their entire delegation. Finally, Grex lifted the bowl to his mouth and took a careful sip. The change in his expression was immediate and impossible to hide. His eyes widened, his massive shoulders relaxed slightly. He took a longer drink, then another. "This liquid contains the essence of strength," he said quietly. His voice had lost some of its harsh edge. "I can taste the power of the creatures that gave their bones to make it. But there is something else, something I do not recognize." Hyun Woo sat down across from the giant warrior. "That something else is time and care. And the knowledge that someone important enough to feed properly was coming to share our table." Grex set down the bowl and looked directly at the human ambassador. For the first time since arriving, he seemed to really see Hyun-woo as an individual, rather than just a representative of an inferior species. "On Corva, we consume our prey immediately after the kill," Grex explained. "It is considered honorable to taste their strength, while it still flows in their flesh. Speed shows respect for the fallen." Hyun-woo nodded with genuine interest. "I understand that tradition. But humans learned that time can also show respect. This broth carries the essence of many meals, many bones, many hours of careful attention. It is not fast, but it is deep." Grex took another drink. His expression grew thoughtful. "Your patience creates layers of meaning, like the history written in a warrior's scars. Each hour of cooking adds another story to the taste." Around the room, similar conversations were beginning. The Aquarian ambassador, flowing current of wisdom, was discussing the liquid version of doenjang jjigae with subin. The fermented soybean soup had been completely reimagined for her species' needs, but somehow it still tasted like home to Korean palates. "Your species treats preparation as meditation," the Aquarian observed. Her liquid voice created gentle waves of sound. "This soup contains contemplation as well as nutrients." Other aliens were beginning to relax. The formal stiffness of diplomatic protocol was melting away as warm food worked its ancient magic. Beings who had arrived as skeptics were becoming curious. Those who had come to mock were starting to understand, but the evening was far from over, and the real test of human diplomacy through cuisine was yet to come. The first course had succeeded beyond all expectations. Now came the greater challenge, turning shared meals into lasting understanding. As the evening deepened, something remarkable began to happen. The careful diplomatic language that usually filled interspecies meetings started to disappear. In its place came real conversation, personal stories, genuine curiosity about each other's worlds and ways of life. Minji moved between tables like a conductor leading an orchestra. She explained techniques and ingredients to fascinated aliens who had never considered that food preparation could be both science and art. Her enthusiasm was infectious, spreading from table to table as beings discovered new ways of thinking about nutrition. At the Nexari table, Veltar was deep in conversation with Dong Ho about fermentation chemistry. The crystal being's body created soft musical tones as he spoke, a sign of genuine excitement among his people. "This bacterial transformation process," Veltar chimed, "it is more sophisticated than our industrial food synthesis methods. Your species has learned to cooperate with microorganisms rather than simply controlling them." Dong Ho leaned forward, eagerly. "That is exactly right. We do not force the bacteria to work for us. We create conditions where they want to do what benefits both them and us. The fermentation happens naturally, but we guide it with temperature, time, and the right environment." "Cooperation instead of domination," Veltar mused. "This suggests a fundamental difference in how your species approaches problem-solving. You work with natural processes instead of replacing them." At another table, the hive speaker Zach was explaining efficiency concepts to Su Bin while examining his second portion of bulgogi. His people valued optimization above almost everything else, but human cooking had introduced him to a new kind of efficiency. "Your marination process requires significant time investment," he clicked thoughtfully. "By our calculations, this should reduce overall efficiency. But the result provides enhanced nutrition absorption and increased satisfaction response. The time cost creates value that exceeds the initial investment." Su Bin smiled. "We have a saying, good things come to those who wait. Sometimes the longest path leads to the best destination." "Your species has discovered temporal optimization," Zach responded with what might have been excitement. "You invest time in early stages to maximize results in later stages. This is advanced strategic thinking." But the most significant transformation was happening at the Corvin table. Ambassador Grex had finished his soup and moved on to the adapted bulgogi that Minji had prepared specially for his people's dietary needs. The meat had been marinated in a mixture that included traditional Korean ingredients and native Corvin herbs. "This preparation method," Grex said to Hyunwoo, "it reminds me of how our weapon masters treat steel. They do not simply heat metal and shape it. They fold it many times, adding layers of strength and flexibility. Your cooking does something similar with food." Hyunwoo had not expected this comparison, but it made perfect sense. "Yes, exactly like that. We build flavor in layers. First the base ingredients, then the marinade, then the cooking process, then the final seasonings. Each step adds depth and complexity." Grex cut another piece of meat with surprising delicacy for such massive hands. "On Corva, we believed that changing food too much showed disrespect for what was killed to feed us. But this—" He paused to take another bite. "This honors the ingredients by making them more than they could be alone." "That is the heart of cooking," Hyunwoo agreed. "We do not hide the natural flavors. We help them become the best versions of themselves." The giant warrior was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice had lost almost all of its earlier hostility. "Your species understands something about strength that we had not considered. True power is not just about force. It is about transformation, about making something greater than the sum of its parts. Around the room, other barriers were falling as well. The Aquarian ambassador was sharing stories about her homeworld's title ceremonies while tasting a liquid version of kimchi jjigae that had been perfectly adapted for her liquid-based metabolism. Your fermentation process creates harmony between opposing forces, flowing current of wisdom observed. Preservation and change, tradition and innovation, like the eternal dance between high tide and low tide on our world. Even the more reserved species were opening up. A delegation of Mantari, insect-like beings who rarely spoke to outsiders, were asking detailed questions about spice combinations. They had discovered that certain Korean seasonings enhance their natural ability to process complex carbohydrates. These flavor compounds serve multiple functions, their spokesperson buzzed through a translation device. Taste enhancement, preservation, nutritional optimization, and even emotional satisfaction. Your species has created multidimensional food technology. Minji beamed with pride as she explained her grandmother's secret gochujang recipe to a group of fascinated aliens. The pepper paste ferments for 2 years minimum, sometimes longer. My family has containers that have been aging for a decade. A decade! Veltar's crystalline structure practically sang with amazement. Your species plans food preparation across multiple seasons, multiple years. This shows incredible long-term thinking. Some of our traditional foods age for much longer, Dong Ho added. We have soy sauce that has been fermenting for centuries, passed down through generations. Each family adds their own touches, but the base remains connected to our ancestors. This concept seemed to fascinate the aliens even more than the complex flavors. The idea that food could carry history, that recipes could be living connections to the past, was completely foreign to most of their cultures. As the evening progressed, the conversation grew more personal. Aliens began sharing stories about their own food traditions. The Corvins talked about ritual hunting meals that honored fallen enemies. The Nexari described crystalline formations that provided both nutrition and spiritual connection to their planet's mineral consciousness. But it was Grex who provided the evening's most surprising moment. As dessert was being served, he stood up slowly. His massive frame commanded immediate attention from everyone in the room. I came here tonight to prove that humans were too primitive for the Galactic Council, he announced. His voice carried, clearly through the suddenly quiet hall. I expected to find crude food preparation that confirmed our prejudices about your species. He paused, looking around at the other alien ambassadors. Instead, I have discovered that we were the primitive ones. We judged without understanding. We mocked what we had never experienced. We let arrogance blind us to wisdom. Grex turned to face Hyunwoo directly. Your species has mastered something that we warriors never learned. You have found strength through gentleness, power through patience, victory through service to others. The Corvin ambassador picked up his glass, which had been filled with a traditional Korean rice wine adapted for his metabolism. I propose a toast to the humans, who have taught us that true civilization is measured not by the sophistication of our weapons, but by the care we put into feeding each other. One by one, the other ambassadors rose to their feet. Crystal beings chimed in harmony. Insect creatures clicked in rhythm. Aquatic people created waves of approving sound. But the real surprise was yet to come. As the aliens raised their glasses in an unprecedented display of interspecies unity, alarms began sounding throughout the embassy compound. An unscheduled ship was approaching, a ship that had not been invited to this historic dinner. The evening was about to take a dramatic turn. The warning alarms shattered the peaceful atmosphere like breaking glass. Red lights flashed throughout the dining hall as the embassy's security system activated. Through the large windows, a sleek silver ship could be seen descending toward The landing pad without permission. The conversation stopped immediately. Alien ambassadors who had been laughing and sharing stories moments before suddenly remembered they were representatives of different worlds and different interests. The unity that had been building throughout the evening seemed fragile in the face of this unexpected interruption. Hyunwoo felt his stomach drop. Everything had been going so perfectly. The aliens were actually enjoying human food. Barriers were breaking down. Real understanding was developing between species that had been suspicious of each other for generations. Now this Subin appeared at his side, speaking quietly but urgently. The ship belongs to the Solani Confederacy. Ambassador Thekvar is aboard with a full security detail. He is demanding immediate landing clearance. The Solani were one of the most powerful species in the galaxy. They were also among the most traditional and rigid. Thekvar himself was known for his strict interpretation of galactic protocols and his deep suspicion of anything new or different. He was not invited, Hyunwoo said, though he already knew that would not matter. Diplomatic immunity meant that any council member could visit any embassy at any time, invited or not. The silver ship touched down with mechanical precision. Its boarding ramp lowered immediately, and Ambassador Thekvar emerged like an angry storm cloud. He was tall and thin, with feathers that shifted colors depending on his mood. Right now they were dark red, the Sulani equivalent of barely controlled fury. Behind him came 6 security guards in matching uniforms. They carried weapons that hummed with barely contained energy. This was not a friendly diplomatic visit. This was an intervention. Thekvar strode through the embassy corridors with his guards flanking him. Embassy staff scattered out of his way. Even the alien dinner guests seemed to sense that something dangerous was approaching. He entered the dining hall like a predator entering a peaceful meadow. His artificial voice translator made his words sound even colder than usual. This gathering violates Protocol 7 of the Cultural Contamination Accords, he announced without any diplomatic pleasantries, forcing members of different species to consume alien biological matter constitutes assault under galactic law. The room fell completely silent. Even the soft background music seemed to stop. Every alien ambassador suddenly remembered that they were not just sharing a meal. They were potentially breaking ancient laws designed to prevent one species from harming another. Thekvar's feathers shifted to a darker shade of red as he continued. The Sulani Confederacy calls for the immediate termination of this event and formal sanctions against the human delegation for attempted cultural imperialism. Several ambassadors looked uncomfortable. The Mantari delegation began making nervous buzzing sounds. Even some of the braver species seemed to be reconsidering their participation in the dinner. This was exactly what Hyunwoo had feared. That their gesture of friendship would be twisted into something sinister by those who preferred the old ways of separation and suspicion. But before he could respond, something unexpected happened. Ambassador Grex slowly rose to his full impressive height. The massive Corvan warrior faced the Solani prosecutor without any sign of intimidation. "You speak of contamination, Thekvar," Grex rumbled, his voice filling the hall. "But I see only sharing. The humans have shown us something we had never considered before today." Grex gestured toward his empty plates. "They spent days adapting their food to our different biologies. They researched our nutritional needs. They modified their recipes so that each species could safely participate. This was not contamination. This was consideration." Other voices began to join in. Veltar's crystal form chimed with harmonic agreement. The human Minji dedicated extensive time to ensuring our mineral requirements were met while maintaining the essential character of her cuisine. This demonstrated respect for both cultures. Hive speaker Zach's clicking sounds grew rapid and excited as his translator worked to keep up. "This meal has provided new optimization strategies for nutritional efficiency. We formally request extended cultural exchange protocols with human food sciences." Even the normally reserved Aquarian ambassador added her liquid voice to the growing chorus of support. The preparation methods we witnessed tonight show advanced understanding of biochemical processes. This knowledge should be shared, not restricted. Thekvar's feathers darkened further. His security guards shifted nervously, unsure whether they should be protecting him from hostile aliens or enforcing galactic law against willing participants. "You have all been compromised by chemical manipulation," Thekvar declared. His translator gave his words an edge of desperation. "Human food contains addictive compounds designed to create psychological dependency. Your judgment has been impaired." This accusation was serious. If true, it could not only end human participation in the Galactic Council, but potentially lead to criminal charges against everyone involved in preparing the meal. Subin stepped forward with the calm confidence that had made her one of Earth's best diplomats. "Ambassador Thekvar, every being here made the choice to attend voluntarily. We forced no one to eat anything against their will. If you have concerns about the effects of human cuisine, perhaps you should experience it yourself before making legal accusations." The challenge hung in the air like an electric charge. Thekvar had arrived ready to shut down the gathering and punish the humans for their presumption. He had not expected to be challenged to actually try the food he was condemning. "You dare suggest that I contaminate myself with your primitive preparations?" he responded, his feathers now almost black with indignation. "I suggest that you make informed decisions based on evidence rather than prejudice," Subin replied calmly. "You are accusing us of poisoning galactic representatives. Surely the burden of proof requires you to at least examine what you claim is so dangerous." Around the room, the other ambassadors watched this confrontation with intense interest. Some seemed curious to see what Thekvar would do. Others appeared worried about the legal implications if he refused. Grex spoke into the tense silence. "On Corva, we have a saying. A warrior who condemns an enemy's weapon without testing its edge fights with ignorance instead of strength." The massive alien looked directly at the Sulani prosecutor. "You came here to judge human food as primitive and dangerous, but you have never tasted it. You have never experienced what we have experienced tonight. How can your judgment have any meaning?" Thekvar found himself trapped by his own accusations. If human food was truly dangerous, examining it would prove his case. But if he refused to test his claims, he would appear foolish in front of the entire galactic diplomatic community. Minji appeared beside Subin carrying a small bowl. She had prepared the gentlest possible introduction to Korean cuisine, a simple version of myeokguk, seaweed soup, that had been carefully modified for Sulani dietary requirements. "Ambassador Thekvar," she said respectfully, "this soup contains only ingredients that your species normally consumes. The only difference is that they have been combined using human preparation methods. If our cuisine is truly as dangerous as you claim, this small portion will prove your case." The prosecutor looked at the bowl as if it contained molten metal. His security guards waited for orders. The other ambassadors held their breath. The future of human participation in galactic society hung in the balance, decided by a bowl of soup. Ambassador Thekvar stared at the bowl of soup as if it held the future of the galaxy, which in many ways it did. His feathers had stopped shifting colors, settling into a dark purple that indicated deep internal conflict among his people. Around the dining hall, 47 beings from 9 different species waited in absolute silence. The only sound was the soft hum of the embassy's life support systems and the distant rumble of ships in the night sky. Thekvar's security guards remained, motionless, their weapons powered down but ready. They had come expecting to arrest criminals. Instead, they found themselves witnesses to a moment that would change galactic history. Finally, the proud Sulani ambassador reached for the bowl with movements so careful they might have been performing surgery. His long, delicate fingers wrapped around the ceramic surface. Steam rose from the liquid, carrying scents that were completely foreign to his experience. "This is highly irregular," he muttered, though whether to himself or to his guards was unclear. He lifted the bowl to his beak-like mouth and took the smallest possible sip. The change was not dramatic like it had been with Grex. Thekvar was too controlled, too disciplined to show strong emotion in public. But his feathers began to shift from dark purple to a lighter shade. His rigid posture softened almost imperceptibly. He took a second sip, longer this time. Then a third. This is... He paused, searching for words that his translator could properly convert. This is more complex than anticipated. Dong-Ho stepped forward respectfully. The thermal processing has created molecular combinations that do not exist in raw ingredients. The flavor profile is enhanced while maintaining all nutritional requirements. For your species, Thekvar set the bowl down but did not push it away. His feathers had shifted to a neutral gray, the Sulani equivalent of deep thought. The preparation process transforms basic ingredients into something fundamentally different, he admitted quietly. It is molecular engineering using biological processes instead of industrial methods. Exactly, Minji said with gentle enthusiasm. Cooking is not about destroying natural ingredients. It is about helping them become more than they could be alone. What happened next surprised everyone in the room, including Thekvar himself. The stern prosecutor picked up the bowl and finished the entire portion of soup. When he set it down, his feathers had shifted to pale blue, a color that indicated wonder among his people. This technique creates optimization without artificial additives, he said, his voice lacking its earlier hostility. The heating process, the combination of elements, the time factor, they work together to enhance both nutrition and satisfaction simultaneously. Grex let out what might have been a chuckle. Welcome to human cooking, prosecutor. We have all been educated tonight. Over the next 3 hours, something unprecedented happened in the Galactic Council's history. Traditional enemies sat together comparing notes about flavor profiles. Species that had maintained diplomatic distance for centuries found common ground in discussions about food preparation techniques. Thekvar, the prosecutor who had arrived to shut down the gathering, found himself deep in conversation with Veltar about the scientific principles behind fermentation. His security guards had been dismissed back to their ship. His legal accusations had been quietly withdrawn. The human approach to nutrition represents advanced biological cooperation, Thekvar concluded after sampling several more dishes. Your species has developed symbiotic relationships with microorganisms, controlled chemical processes, and time-based optimization strategies that exceed our industrial food synthesis methods. As the evening finally wound down, ambassadors who had arrived as skeptics were leaving as converts. Formal requests for cultural exchange programs were being drafted. Recipe-sharing protocols were being discussed. Some species were already planning to send their own food scientists to Earth. But the real transformation went deeper than just appreciation for human cuisine. Ambassador Grex approached Hyunwoo as the Corvin delegation prepared to leave. The massive warrior who had arrived ready to prove human inferiority now looked at the human diplomat with something approaching respect. "You have taught us something important tonight," Grex said in his rumbling voice. "We came here believing that strength meant never changing, never adapting, never learning from others. But you showed us that real strength comes from taking what exists and making it better." He gestured toward the empty dishes on his table. "Your food is like your diplomacy. You do not destroy what came before. You build on it. You improve it. You make it serve purposes that the original creators never imagined." 6 months later, the crisis everyone had feared finally arrived. The Zalani Empire, a militant species from the galaxy's outer rim, declared war on the established rim worlds. Alliance. Trade routes were blocked. Colonies were evacuated. The Galactic Council faced its greatest challenge in centuries. Traditional diplomatic methods failed completely. Negotiations broke down. Mediators were rejected by both sides. Military intervention seemed inevitable. It was Ambassador Veltar who made the suggestion that changed everything. Perhaps, the crystal being chimed during an emergency council session, we should invite both sides to dinner. The Soul Accords, named for the Earth City where Minji had learned her craft, brought representatives from both sides of the conflict to a neutral space station. But instead of conference rooms and negotiation tables, they found kitchens and dining halls. Chefs from dozens of worlds worked together to create meals that honored each species' traditions while introducing them to new possibilities. Enemies who had been ready to destroy each other found themselves sharing recipes instead of threats. The war never happened. Instead, the galaxy discovered something that humans had known for millennia. It is very difficult to hate someone after you have shared a meal with them. The human embassy became the busiest diplomatic location in known space. Every major treaty negotiation began with a shared meal. Every trade agreement was celebrated with a feast that honored all participants' cultures. And in the embassy kitchen, Minji kept a simple sign above her workspace that had been translated into 47 different languages. Food is love made edible. Years later, when historians wrote about the transformation of galactic diplomacy, they would mark the beginning with a simple Korean lunchbox in a council chamber. They would note how ridicule became curiosity, how suspicion became understanding, and how a challenge issued in anger became the foundation for lasting peace. Ambassador Grex, in his memoirs, wrote what became the most quoted passage about the event. The humans taught us that civilization is not measured by the sophistication of our weapons or the speed of our ships, but by how much care we put into the simple act of nourishing each other. When you cook for someone, you are saying they matter enough to transform raw ingredients into something beautiful, just for them. This may be the most advanced technology any species has ever developed, but perhaps the most important change was the simplest one. In council chambers throughout the galaxy, diplomatic meetings no longer began with formal protocols and legal procedures. They began with a question that had become the standard opening for all interspecies negotiations. What shall we eat together? And in that question lay the secret of lasting peace. It is impossible to remain strangers with someone whose hunger you have satisfied. The galaxy had learned to cook together, and in learning to feed each other, they had finally learned to understand each other. The joke about human food had become the foundation of galactic unity, and it all started with a simple lunchbox and one human's willingness to defend what his mother had taught him, that food prepared with love can change the world.